What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talker. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Happy 4th of July to everybody out there. A wonderful, hopefully dry 4th of July holiday for everybody celebrating in the city of Pittsburgh. I don't know what it's like down in good old Virginia, but it's looking like we are battling some rain clouds, and I hope it holds off so everybody gets in a pool, eats some hot dogs, enjoys a couple of brews, and then gets up and goes to work tomorrow. But that's all right. That's part of the American dream right there. How we feeling, my friend? Happy 4th of July.
I'm feeling good. Happy 4th of July. I'm excited for the day. I always like the 4th of July because it, combines a couple of my favorite things: grilling, sitting by the pool, and then tomorrow, golf. So,
Yes.
I said that yesterday. I'll say it again today simply because they are my favorite things to do in the summer, and I'm very excited for all three of them.
Good. I'm glad. I hope you get to do every single one of them. How upset are you? Disappointed? How much different does today feel that there is no Joey Chestnut going to be on television? Because I won't lie to you. I sit in front. That is my 4th of July, is I sit in front of the TV. I make my wife sit with me. She gags the whole time. It's a rough event for her, but she knows if you're going to be a Strackbine, we are watching the National Hot Dog Eating Contest. No Joey Chestnut. I don't know if I'm going to watch it this year.
Yeah, it took the wind out of my sails a little bit too. But at the same time, it might be a little bit more interesting because who was realistically who was going to take down Joey Chestnut? I mean, it's like Alabama of the mid 2010s. Like, if it were to happen, it would be a huge thing. But who's really going to do it? So, maybe it'll be a little bit more entertaining this year because it'll be a close race. But at the same time, no Joey Chestnut is tough to swallow.
That's a tough one. It's tough. There's a part of you that I agree with you, and then there's another part that says, really, you only watched it to see how good Joey Chestnut could be. You were sitting there going, it's Joey Chestnut versus Joey Chestnut, and I want to see Joey Chestnut win. And that's not the case this year. Sad day, but it's all right. Still 4th of July. I hope everybody enjoys it. I want to start there with the holiday, with the hot dog eating contest. I didn't tell you this was going to be on the docket. I should have told you this was going to be on the docket, but I figured I'd throw a little curveball at you. Okay. Hot dog eating contest in the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room. 53 men, 90 right now. Who you got coming away? Champion. And you think they're over under, I don't know, let's say 35 dogs.
Ooh, I mean, you would automatically start to think of who's on the lines, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the first name that pops out to me is one of the 2 second-year guys on defense. It's Keanu Benton. I feel like he could put him away, but also, I don't know, Broderick Jones seems like that's something he would get far too into. So I might lean Broderick Jones at the end of the day. And I think Broderick over 35. Jones, I think he put away over 35.
Yeah, I think over 35 as well. Broderick Jones is a good one. Keanu Benton's a real good one. I'm saying Nate Herbig. Big dude, Hawaiian. So I don't know. I'm guessing that they eat food. Probably a lot of it. I couldn't tell you. But I just feel like if anybody's he gives me the look of this guy's about to scarf down some hot dogs and enjoy them. He's got the technique. Braden Fehoko would also be another name that I think might be a sleeper in that realm of possibilities.
Nate Herbig does look like a 4th of July MVP. Like,
yes,
backyard games, beer pong, cornhole, flip cup. Yeah. It seems like he'd probably excel at a lot of those things.
Yeah, the Herbig brothers are partying, having a great time on the 4th of July. I could see it. And then, everybody, Nick's over there bragging about how good Nate is at slamming the dogs. So, yeah, I'm going Nate Herbig. I like all the picks. I would like to see it happen, but it's a good one. It's a good one. I was on, I'll give a shout out to Steelers Afternoon Drive. I was on there yesterday. If you guys don't check out their show, you should today, because I tried to convince Zachary Smith to let off fireworks in his pool. We'll see if it happens. All right, let's talk some actual Pittsburgh Steelers football here. We got 3 pretty big topics, and I'm excited for July to actually have some news to talk about. First is the wide receiver market. Some updates along the way for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they ride the roller coaster and watch from afar as everything continues to twist and turn, and they try to settle into a potential trade and any candidate that they could potentially get their eyes on. I actually had a couple of conversations yesterday. It was nice to have some productive conversations about the Steelers wide receiver market. And I was told that look it, with Omar Khan, everything and anything is on the table and remains on the table. And that's a pretty big update in my eyes. That's not what we're going to talk about. That's not what the update is. We got more to dive into, but I heard that yesterday and it felt reassuring that we're not just having these conversations just to have these conversations, that there's real noise and belief in the Steelers facility that something could go down at any moment and Omar Khan's waiting for it to happen. Meanwhile, Cam Heyward, there's some updates there and some issues, some kind of turning points that might get rough pretty quickly as he goes through contract negotiations. And then we'll talk Steelers offensive line and some changing thoughts that I think a lot of people are having as we approach training camp and what that starting five could look like come week one. Let's start with the wide receivers. Obviously, the biggest news in Pittsburgh Steelers land remains the biggest news in Pittsburgh Steelers land. They got two updates here. The first one's from Adam Schefter on Brandon Aiyuk. Aiyuk, I said that correctly, right? Somebody called me out the other day, and I was determined to start
right. Yeah.
saying correctly. Yes, even though we all know I'm poor when it comes to name. This is from Adam Schefter, who is speaking on the Rothman and Ice radio show. Quote, I would expect that he's in a Niners uniform this season. The question is it going to be beyond this year? He's under contract to them, and why would a Super Bowl contending team trade a starting wide receiver for a future draft pick? Not going to do that. That doesn't do anything to help you win a Super Bowl this year. I don't expect them trading him. That's not what I'm expecting right now. Whether they can get a contract worked out or not, that's a different issue. They've been talking. Doesn't seem like they're very close right now. Those things could heat up pretty quickly. We'll start with that one before we go into another name and some updates there. My only issue with that is that we have been involved in this roller coaster long enough. We have carried on this ride long enough to know that, yes, Schefter has a point that the 49ers are a Super Bowl winning team, and we make the argument for the Pittsburgh Steelers plenty about how they don't get rid of puzzle pieces when they're trying to form a championship team. But at the same time, there have already been reports that the Pittsburgh Steelers and the 49ers almost had a deal locked into place during the NFL draft, that there are legs, that Brandon Aiyuk's called out the team on social media for, oh, I thought that they didn't want to trade me. I don't know if I follow along with the same, they're not going to trade him because they're a Super Bowl team. I think right now they look at it and say, maybe we don't want to trade him because we're a Super Bowl team. But if their options are Brandon Aiyuk is going to sit on the sideline in 2024, or you trade him, you trade him. And I don't think that there's any question there from any team in the NFL, especially one that has the amount of receiving options that the 49ers do and who have gone through all of these issues as long as the 49ers have. It could change course and could say, hey, well, if we have to make a decision, Deebo Samuel is on his way out instead of Brandon Aiyuk. But I don't see this being we're not going to trade anybody because we're a Super Bowl winning team and we'll take the L before we actually make a move. That one doesn't make sense. I just feel Schefter's a guy that at times has been called out for kind of only getting reports from the teams and not necessarily the agents as much as you would like. And I feel as if that's something that is happening here, where the San Francisco 49ers are trying desperately to push a narrative and they are tossing it out there. And that's the reports that we're getting, when clearly there have been reports from the other side that say differently. I don't think that the 49ers are ruling out a trade. I think that they're trying to make this work, but day by day, they're realizing it's not going to. Do you think that you follow? Do you agree with Adam Schefter? Do you agree with my argument? Do you have a different argument? What's your thoughts?
I think there's one big factor here that Schefter is kind of missing, is that sitting out factor for Brandon Aiyuk, right? Because, yes, if you're a Super Bowl contender and Brandon Aiyuk is 100% going to play regardless of a contract extension, then yeah, you probably keep him and try to see what you can do at the end of the season. But at the same time, if he does play, it's an asset management thing. Do you really want to risk losing potentially a top wide receiver for absolutely nothing at the end of the season? If you win a Super Bowl, yeah, sure, who cares? But again, that is a big if, and we've seen with the 49ers, they struggle to finish the job once they get there. So it's a bad asset management, but then the only other thing I'll say is, when have the 49ers ever been good at asset management? This is still the team that traded the farm for Trey Lance and then traded him away for peanuts.
That's true. That is very true. They have never been good at asset, which could work against the Steelers or any team trying to make a trade. I guess it's be the Steelers and the Washington Commanders at this point, but it could work against them in that favor in that way, because they might just stick to their guns and be stubborn enough to say, we are going to hold on to Aiyuk and we are not going to get rid of anybody because this is a Super Bowl team. And then they'll sit on him all season long and he'll walk next year and sign wherever he wants to walk. That's wild if you are an NFL GM to sit around, or an ownership group to allow that to happen and sit there and say, we'll get rid of a star guy, or we'll let a star guy walk, when we had offers, probably good ones. There's no way that the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Washington Commanders or anybody else who's made a trade attempt is sitting there tossing 4th-round picks at the San Francisco 49ers. If they nearly had a trade in place, I'm guessing it's at minimum a 2nd-round pick. That's where they were going. And I would imagine that it's more likely a 1st than a 2nd. But maybe you're right. Maybe the 49ers are just run in that poor of a way that there are some issues and there's some concerns there, and maybe it won't happen. I don't know. I don't agree when it comes to Schefter's view on these things and what he's reporting. I've been told that the Pittsburgh Steelers very recently still believe that there's a shot because Omar Khan's in-house and anything could happen when Omar Khan's in-house. And to be honest, I was reading Mark Caboli's piece on the AFC North whip around yesterday, and he said the same thing, that if Omar Khan's here, anything could happen. And my thought was, yeah, everybody else seems to believe that too. So I won't rule anything off the table. Here's the other one. There's a lot of rumbles, a lot of speculation, a lot of names being tossed out all the time of who the Pittsburgh Steelers could trade for when it comes to a wide receiver. The newest one, the latest one, is CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Clarence Hill, a Dallas Cowboys insider, says that the number it's going to take to sign CeeDee Lamb to a contract extension is at least $32 million per year. The Pittsburgh Steelers are probably looking at the same number when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk. If you're going to make a trade, especially for CeeDee Lamb, when he's not really forcing a holdout and he doesn't have the same off-the-field drama that Aiyuk has brought to the 49ers, chances are you're giving up more to get CeeDee Lamb. I would say if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan sitting around thinking CeeDee Lamb's an option, we could rule that one out as we sit here today. I've never asked about CeeDee Lamb. I could if you guys want me to. I don't know if I feel I wouldn't sit around and say, is CeeDee Lamb an option to somebody that I'm looking for insight to, because truthfully, I don't believe that his name has even been mentioned in the Pittsburgh Steelers facility. But at $32 million, there's zero chance that CeeDee Lamb becomes a Pittsburgh Steeler ever.
Yeah, it's the same issues we had early on when we were talking about Brandon Aiyuk, right? It's too much money, especially for where the Steelers currently sit, where as of right now, they have quarterbacks on 1-year deals. They're going to have to pay somebody, and they might be able to get somebody on a cheaper deal next year, but there's also going to be other players that are coming up. It feels like it's way too expensive, not to mention the fact that you just said it's going to be very high as far as an acquisition cost for CeeDee Lamb that I don't think that Omar Khan's going to be willing to trade for.
No, I think he's off the table. I think all of these guys over $30 million outside of Aiyuk are off the table. I don't know why Ayuk's still on the table, but the Steelers have a fascination with this guy, and they think that they could do a lot of things with him. So he's still on the table. The rest of them, I just don't see it happening. I don't see it happening unless something crazy happened and things have changed and the Steelers are just saying, whatever, who cares? But where we stand, I'm going to say no. Let's talk about something other than the wide receiver trades and where the Pittsburgh Steelers stand currently, and that is Cam Heyward, who Steelers Now, Alan Saunders reports, has hit a quote-unquote sticking point in contract negotiations. It seems that that sticking point is the difference between 2 and 3 years on a contract extension. Cam Heyward, who's 35 years old this season, wants to play another 2 to 3 years. It seems that maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers want it to be fewer years and Cam Heyward wants it to be more years. I'm starting to get a little worried that things are not going to work out between the two sides. Granted, Cam Heyward has been here before where it's come down to the final hour and you thought Cam wasn't going to get a deal done, and then he did get a deal done. 35 years old, I don't feel as good about that one. my thoughts here are very simple. If you're Cam Heyward, you don't want to go out as an enemy. You don't want to go out as the bad guy. You don't want to go out as the villain. And I think he might be approaching that the longer this goes on and the more that is said and social media these days and the whole nine, you could really kind of dig yourself a bit of a hole. And I don't want Cam to do that. But if things don't go north before the end of all this, I think there's a possibility that it does. I don't think he's going to go out as gracefully as Troy Polamalu or Hines Ward or Ben Roethlisberger. I look at Cam as a guy who's going to stick to his guns and say, hey, I'm playing football, whether it's in Pittsburgh or somewhere else. I'm going to play football. He's not going to be forced into retirement. And I don't know if that's going to end in Pittsburgh. But to be honest, at 35 years old, I'm not giving anybody a 3-year contract extension. I don't care who you are, because you're going to be 38 by the time that's over. You're dealing with injuries already. Just doesn't make any sense. I could see a 1-year deal. I could see a 2-year deal max where everything's backloaded and nothing's guaranteed in that final year. So you're going to take a shot on yourself if you're Cam Heyward. There's no chance a 3-year deal is on the table if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think things could end kind of ugly when it comes to Cam and the Steelers at this point.
Yeah, when he was talking at OTAs, I was telling you before we got on the show, he said, yeah, I think I can play for 2 or 3 more years. I thought he was saying including this year. And I was like, all right, well, 2-year extension, that makes sense. And I feel like that fits. And we had talked about that previously. If he wants that 3rd year after this year and playing 4 more years, including this year, I think that's a little bit like you mentioned. I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch. But the other thing with Cam Heyward is, and we kind of talked about it in the inverse with Brandon Aiyuk, is there's no question whether or not he's going to play this year. So there is a world in which the Steelers say, listen, we're not going to do it right now. You're coming off of a season that was pretty much lost to injuries. And he goes out there, has a good year. And the Steelers say, you know what? We feel better about this, and all's well that ends well. But we also talked about the fact that, Cam Heyward, there's a reason that this is different than those other instances you mentioned. He's trying to get ahead of it. He wants to get ahead of it. He doesn't want to play on a contract year. He wants to be secure that he's going to be a Steeler for life. And I'm not sure how that's going to play mentally with him if they don't get a deal done and he ends up having to play on a contract season, how that changes his view of being a quote unquote one helmet guy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And this is a valid point here, and I want to address this. So if Russell Wilson played well, you wouldn't offer him a 3-year contract extension that would have him tied up until he's 39 years old. If he's asking for real quarterback money, the answer is no, because at some point guys are going to fall off, and you could have one good year. And Cam Heyward's a totally different example than Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson's a quarterback. Cam Heyward's taken a lot more blow to that body every single season than a quarterback is, especially if you could keep him clean. Most guys who play defensive tackle don't play every single game, every single down until they're 38 years old. You have guys like Ndamukong Suh and many others who have played into their late 30s who sign with teams in week 15 and then go on a playoff run. That's what they do. And if Cam wanted to be that guy who signs for $4 million in week 13, all right, great. But if you're going to expect him to play 17 games a season at 36, 37, 38 years old, there's no chance. There's no chance any team is taking a risk on that and saying that's the way we're going to approach things and expect it to work out in our favor. Just doesn't work. Quarterback, yeah, you could play every game at 39 years old. They do it all the time. Defensive tackle, that almost never happens. And Russ as a whole on the other side of that, depending on the money, I don't think I'm giving Russ a contract extension, even if he goes out and wins a Super Bowl, unless it's cheap and you're taking a super team-friendly deal in the 20s or maybe the 30s max. But Cam Heyward's a totally other animal. You're not giving a defensive tackle $15 million a year at 37 years old and saying, go play 17 games. I don't care how good he is. No team is going to take that chance on a guy like Cam Heyward. I hope it ends in a positive direction. I hope Cam Heyward at some point adjusts his view and they find some middle ground and they make it work somehow. I would hate to see Cam go play somewhere else. I think that would be a real bummer to the end of his career. But at the same time, in 10 years, nobody remembers those things. Nobody remembers that. I mean, you could take it as far as anybody. You could take it as far as anybody. Joe Montana is the biggest name that everybody uses in this example, but our kids won't remember until we tell them that Joe Montana played for the Kansas City Chiefs. And even then, they'll forget most of the time. But they'll remember who Joe Montana is because they've learned about Joe Montana, the San Francisco 49ers quarterback. Cam Heyward will be the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive tackle who in 10 years people won't remember played a season for the Houston Texans or whoever. Hopefully not the Cleveland Browns. Won't be the Cleveland Browns. But you know the Cleveland Browns will throw an offer at him. You know it'll be a big one too. They'll 100% try to do it.
100%. The only other thing I'll say before we move on and finish off with the next segment is when I was reading that article that Alan put out there, he did mention two-time Coach of the Year Kevin Stefanski. That I can't remember. Like that again, speaking of things that you just don't remember, I can't believe he's a two-time Coach of the Year.
Two-time Coach of the Year. I believe he's got as many playoff wins as Mike Tomlin in that amount of time. So, you know, yeah, it's all perspective. Everything is perspective. All right, last thing I want to talk about here before we answer all your guys' questions. So please toss them in there. Again, happy 4th of July. Would love to finish every show with some questions. So make sure they're all in there. The Steelers offensive line. There's been a lot of talk about Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Brandon Thor, who is one of, if not the best offensive line analyst out there, said the other day that Zach Frazier might already be a top 10 center in the NFL, which is massive expectations. Everybody wants to know what the Steelers starting offensive line is going to look like in 2024 and how damaging it could be if a guy like Troy Fautanu or Zach Frazier is not out there. And I think it's time to just dive into a little bit because the way I look at it, and I think other analysts and other insiders and other beat reporters are kind of starting to toss it out there, that Troy Fautanu isn't viewed right now as a guy who is expected to start at the start of the 2024 season. I think I sit in that same notion. I don't believe that Troy Fautanu is ready to be a starting right tackle in the NFL. I'm very worried that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to try to make Dan Moore a right tackle and not a left tackle because I want Broderick Jones to play left tackle. I think that's where he should be playing. I don't think Dan Moore is very good at right tackle. So I want to ask you this, and then I'll give you my thoughts on the situation. Is it better to continue to delay Broderick Jones and his development on the left side, or have Dan Moore and Troy Fautanu, who both may not be capable of being productive starting right tackles this season, compete on the right side so that Broderick can play the left?
I think if you're looking at it from a stance of where the Steelers are at right now, which is Super Bowl or bust, we've said that all summer long, the best thing you can do is put Dan Moore on the left, Broderick on the right to start the season. And whenever Troy's ready, you make that switch and you put Broderick back on the left and you have Troy starting on the right. I don't know how long that's going to take. Maybe it's a similar lead up to what Broderick Jones had last season. Maybe it's a little bit longer. But if you're the Steelers, to put yourself in the best position, especially early in the season when those games are not easy, but easier than it's going to be from week 11 on, you need to have the best options out there that you possibly can. And I think the biggest strength and the best strength for the Steelers offensive line is going to be Dan Moore on the left and Broderick on the right. And I do think that, it does hurt Broderick a little bit, but at the same time, this is a guy that has been so natural on the left side and continues to be adamant that if I move over to the left, there's not going to be too much longer that it's going to take me to get used to it. He said it's going to fit like a glove. It's going to be like getting back into, some shoes that you haven't worn in a while, but they fit perfectly. I think that if you're the Steelers starting off the season, the best case scenario, if Troy's not ready, is the fact that you have to put Dan Moore on the left side because, he can't do it on the right.
No, I agree. I look at this season, and if I'm the Steelers and I'm starting today, Dan Moore is your left tackle and Broderick Jones is your right, and I don't feel great about it, but it's more of a waiting game. You got to wait one more year maybe for Troy Fautanu to be ready to play the right side and for Broderick Jones to move over to the left, and then you go from there. It stinks only because you're narrowing your window to see exactly what Broderick Jones can develop into before you have to sign him to another deal, which isn't great. But again, it's better than my worries on the right side with Dan Moore is he's not capable of playing the right side, that he's not even remotely close to being capable of starting there every single game. And then Troy Fautanu, you stick a rookie out there. Yeah, he might develop, but how much are you going to hurt his confidence? How much are you going to have to start talking about is Troy Fautanu a bust? What is the conversations that are being had inside and outside when it comes to a rookie who isn't ready, who got tossed into the fire, and what are the repercussions that are going to come with that? That's my worry there. And again, you have to put pads on before we truly judge some things, but you could tell the speed of the game sits on guys and takes a little bit longer for some than others. And Troy Fautanu is a guy that right now the game's moving really fast and it needs to slow down, and hopefully it does by the start of the season. But what we've seen so far, Troy Fautanu needs to continue to develop and allow the NFL to come to him, which will happen. I'm not worried about that. I'm just simply talking, here's the offensive line. What can it look like in 2024? I don't foresee Troy Fautanu being in that starting lineup in week 1. Things could change, and I'll admit when they do, but for right now, I don't see that. And I could see Broderick Jones remaining on the right side. If it goes to the left, I think things could be a bit disastrous. And that's kind of the game that you're playing. Zach Frazier on the other side, I expect to start. Unless, Nate Herbig was talking about Jason Kelsey teaching him the other day. That definitely brought some up to his potential. But I still think Zach Frazier is a guy that's ready right now. And you toss him out there 100%. 100%. All right. With that said, I'm done talking. I got nothing else on my to-do list here except for to watch some hot dogs getting eaten that aren't from Joey Chestnut, which is just disappointing, but it is what it is. Make sure you guys are tossing some questions out here. We got a couple more minutes. We'd love to answer all your questions. I think as of right now, we only got one. So if you got more, feel free to toss them in there. We'd love to answer all of them before we head out.
Let's start with Kevin's because he goes back to what we were talking about with Cam Heyward. Says, I don't understand 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. You can always cut him if he doesn't retire. If it's money, I say pay Cam. He's earned more than he's been paid.
I think Cam has earned more than he's been paid. I think Cam is a phenomenal player and a guy who deserves to retire in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. Unfortunately, I can't sit here and say that he's going to be super comfortable with a contract that is not in his favor when it comes to being cut. I think that's the difference. Is it's much more complicated than, sign Cam to a 3-year deal where you can get an out every season. He's not always cool with that. Players aren't always cool with it. Most times they're not cool with it, especially established guys like Cam Heyward. They're not going to look at it and say, yeah, I'll take a contract where in year 1 I make $12 million. In year 2, there's an easy out where I can make 0 if you cut me. And in year 3 is the same way. They're not going to want that. They want some security. That's what the contract's for. They're going to be looking for some guaranteed money, some bonuses, some so on and so forth. That's not going to be as easy as it sounds, unfortunately. But I agree with you. I think he's been paid, or he needs to be paid more, and he's deserved every ounce of respect that he gets in Pittsburgh. Sometimes things just hit crossroads, and I think that's where the Steelers are. It's bad timing. Unfortunately, that's all it is. It's bad timing.
Steltro wants to know, do you think the Steelers have Justin Fields working with someone to redevelop himself, or do you think they're taking a veteran approach with the quarterback?
So I think it's a little bit of both. I think Tom Arth is working with him to improve a lot of things, and he's probably working on some mechanical things and hoping that at 25 years old, he could readjust some of the struggles that Justin Fields shows on the field. At the same time, he's 25 years old. He's been a starter in the NFL. I think they look at this as an opportunity to learn behind Russell Wilson and gain that experience while working with a good offensive coordinator and a quality quarterbacks coach. So if that's the veteran approach, I think to some degree that's what it is. I would say it's a mix of both, where they're trying to develop Justin Fields into more and to reach that potential while at the same time allowing him to grow on his own and with Russell Wilson in front of him.
Vibing with the dog says, what are you looking for at training camp from the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks?
I'm looking for Russell Wilson to be very consistent, and I'm looking for Justin Fields to look like he's the next thing, because that's the best case scenario for the Steelers. Is if Russell Wilson looks like the guy who's ready to start and not lose games this season and be a leader and be a capable quarterback, and we get to hype those things up. And then from Justin Fields to say, ooh, Justin's got a lot of potential. Justin's got those things. He's shown flashes. He's grown. If he continues to develop and grow, I think that's very promising for the future of Justin Fields. those would be what I'm looking for from both guys when we get to Latrobe.
Mike Harmon wants to know, how many rookies do you think will start on the 53-man roster when the regular season begins?
I would say 2. That would really be it, right? It's just the 2 of them. It would just be Zach Frazier. I guess 1, Zach Frazier, because there is no, I don't think Roman Wilson is going to be a starter week 1. I think he comes off the bench. I still think he plays, but I think he comes back off the bench. Zach Frazier might be the only starting rookie for the Steelers in 2024, which is a good thing. That's a good roster. If you only have 1 rookie starting, you're not relying too much on guys that are inexperienced. I would say 1, max 2 with Troy Fautano. By the end of the season, I could see it being 3 if Roman Wilson develops into something that's worthy of starting. Am I missing somebody? Peyton Wilson. Peyton Wilson could be in there too. But Landon Roberts, if healthy, he's out there. He's a stud.
Yeah, that's kind of the 3 starting linebackers at that point that you had last year when everybody was healthy, with the Landon Roberts and Cole Holcomb and Quan Alexander. It's kind of like a switch at that point. So I could definitely see that.
Yeah, at Peyton Wilson, if you want to technically toss him in there as a starter, could be a starter, but he's not going to be on the field in the 50 with the starting lineup.
Broderick Wallace wants to know, I recently learned that Logan Lee has a wrestling background. Zach Frazier, Peyton Wilson, and Logan Lee all have that background. What are your thoughts on this trend, and should it continue?
It should definitely continue. A wrestling background is massive in the NFL. It helps so much when it comes to so many different things: discipline, conditioning, just understanding your body and how it uses its muscles. It's massive for the NFL. I know so many guys in the league who have credited their wrestling background and how much it has helped their development. You also see a ton of guys who get into these things as they move throughout their career. Russell Wilson's into boxing right now. Najee's always been into boxing. You get those guys who you start to find other ways to channel conditioning and just the use of your body, and wrestling's a massive one. Obviously, you don't want to wrestle too much in the NFL because wear and tear, but growing up with it, you have such a better understanding of everything going on. I think it's huge and should definitely continue. The Steelers love it. They always praise a wrestling background.
Better background for you. I'm going to ask this one: wrestling or volleyball, like Troy Fautano?
That's tough. I think any big man who could jump has got me beat. I mean, I still bring up Javon Hargrave showing me videos of him dunking, and I'm like, dude, you're as tall as you can't dunk, pal. You can't, but he could, and he slams it, and it was crazy. So any big man would
Jones too. Broderick Jones has a good
Broderick Jones. You look at him though, you could look at him and say this dude's a baller. You just you get that sense. Javon Hargrave doesn't look like Javon Hargrave's. Just to give you guys an image here, Javon Hargrave's butt is like a big man's butt. You know what I mean? Like when you see like a 350-pound man walking around and you're just like, that guy's massive. That's Javon Hargrave, and he's got hops, and it's great. Broderick Jones looks like he'd drop 30 and play center and challenge some big guys in the NFL.
Burt Butler says, happy 4th to you both. Is there any update with Najee Harris and the running back room?
I would say no update right now. I don't expect there to be an update. I don't expect Najee Harris to sign a deal this offseason. I don't know if I expect him to be on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster in 2025. Jaylen Warren, you're not going to get a contract extension for. You could tender him next year, and then if somebody tries to sign him, you just match that signing. I look at both of those guys as the last year of their deal, and then next year you go into the offseason and you figure it out from there. But I don't expect any updates as of right now.
Richard Hunt says, grinded on the 4th. Well done, fellas. What is the go-to meal on the 4th of July?
Appreciate you, Rich, as always. Go-to meal on the 4th. I'm a classic burgers and dogs with some pork and beans. I'm a big pork and beans guy. So whatever I got, whether it's a burger, whether it's a dog, I'm dunking it in the beans, and then I'm slapping it down with a couple of pickles, and hopefully there's like cupcakes or something. Big cake guy. So whatever you got on deck. What's your go-to there?
I mean, anything you can put on the grill. Burgers, dogs is great. Chicken wings on the grill, great as well. I like a good mac and cheese as well as the sides too. So, anything that you can put on the grill, anything that you can put barbecue sauce on. I'm not putting barbecue sauce on a dog. I'm not saying that, but
I would if it was presented to me. I would.
I mean,
I wouldn't by choice, but yeah. But if it was on the plate already, like a little thing, and I just gave a little dip, you'd catch me doing that.
Yeah. So that, excuse me. Wow. That's what I'd go for. Anything you can put on a grill.
I like it. I'm excited.
Wiley says, when are you dropping the wedding video? Noah. Also, DC Cole Holcomb coming back this season.
I'm not. I don't think I am dropping the wedding video. I won't lie to you guys. I cried like a dog. It was crazy. I keep joking about how all the pictures are just going to be me ugly crying. Not a fan of crying. Just not. It's uncomfortable for me. So there's no chance. There is no chance I'm dropping that wedding video. When it comes to Cole Holcomb playing this season, I want to say yes. I don't know when, but I want to say yes. That only goes off of a belief that he's far enough along that at some point early in the season, he'll be back on the field. I think it'll be a very slow progression. By the end of the year, maybe you're looking at him playing almost a full game, but it's going to be very slow. We'll have more updates in training camp, but as of right now, I don't even think the Steelers have a real understanding of when he could be back.
And I believe that is a wrap for today's questions.
Word. With that said, guys, we are going to head out of here. I hope everybody enjoys their 4th of July and all of their hot dogs, hamburgers, some beer, and watching the hot dog eating contest, even if Joey Chestnut's not in it, but that's okay. We'll get through it. We're going to head out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, please find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We actually have some news that I want to drop before, not Steelers related, before we head out here. We have launched a full NHL site on the On SI network. Myself, good old producer Nick Belsky, along with some phenomenal NHL writers, will all be covering maybe the second favorite league, my second favorite league at this point. I've become a hockey guy since coming to Pittsburgh. You can find that on si.com/on/breakaway. Appreciate all your support. We'll be back tomorrow. Enjoy your 4th of July and enjoy another beautiful day in the Burgh. Peace.